So welcome to the desk of the executive directors, I'm going to call it today, because Shari Prestemon is the previous executive director here before Alice. So preceded Alice, and really was the executive director that took Back Bay Mission through Katrina. Mm-hmm. And really was the executive director that healed the relationship with the city after there was some eminent domain situations with Back Bay when it was actually on the Back Bay.
Right.
So I'm really fortunate and privileged to have an opportunity to sit here with Shari. She was very, very busy while she was back here in Biloxi, so we didn't have a chance to talk too much. But the interesting thing, at least the connectedness, or I guess our kind of paths crossed when I was leaving Minnesota and heading to Phoenix to be the senior pastor there at First Church in Phoenix. And actually, Shari was leaving Biloxi, heading to Minnesota to be the conference minister for the United Church of Christ Conference in Minnesota, where I was at. So I was heading from Minnesota to Phoenix, and Shari was heading from Biloxi to... Yeah. I think maybe we crossed for a month or two, something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I'm just really grateful to be here. And I just kind of want to ask her a few questions, because we are now back in the office that you were in. And I think you said the water level was here after Katrina, right? And so you certainly have some experience with the city, with Katrina, with Back Bay Mission, and with even this literal space. So thank you so much for taking the time to share. So I want to ask you just some maybe high level, low level questions, wherever this takes us. What was most fulfilling for you here at Back Bay Mission? You shared a little bit of that actually with the group of folks we had in here, the entourage, but what was most fulfilling for you about being the executive director here?
Well, to me, Back Bay Mission is sort of it embodies everything that I think the church is supposed to be about. And Back Bay Mission has been that historically here, in the sense that we always talk at Back Bay Mission about Micah's mandate to do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with our God. And the mission does that so beautifully. It's messy sometimes, because the work is messy, the ministry is messy. But this place is about the compassionate care, the loving kindness, and it is also about the doing justice. And the beauty of it is that they go hand in hand. That Back Bay Mission knows that it's not enough just to feed someone today if you're not also asking the question, why are they hungry? And how can we change that for tomorrow? But Back Bay Mission has credibility in doing the justice work because you're always also doing the compassionate work. One informs the other. That's rare. There are a lot of pure advocate places in the world who are a little removed from what's happening on the streets. And there are a lot of places that do good outreach and mission work and compassionate service. And they may not be changing, doing the grassroots legislative advocacy, community organizing work. This place weaves them both together, and one teaches the other. So it's always real. And then the loving kindness is important. Historically, this place, as an example of that, this place has birthed, I don't know how many, I've lost count now, of how many organizations Back Bay Mission organized to meet a need in the community, but then didn't keep it to itself, but spun it off and for its own independence in the community and to be on its own and serve. That's humility, because it'd be nice to be able to, to have your little fiefdom with all these agencies that you can call yours.
Yeah.
But that was never the model of this place. So it's not to say Back Bay Mission is perfect. No organization anywhere is.
Never.
But Back Bay Mission is the church. People sometimes ask me when I came here after serving local churches as pastor, why did you leave the church? I don't know if you've gotten that question.
Oh, yeah.
And I always said, I didn't leave the church. I'm fully serving the church on the streets,
Yeah.
on the front lines right now, every day.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was being part of that and having the opportunity to come into a history and a legacy that was incredible before I got here. And then to be here during a time when the mission could have closed because of Katrina and all that it did to this place. There was every possibility we may not have survived that. But to have the opportunity to lead out of that and actually into a whole new vision. Same mission, but a whole new vision for how to do it. That was a leadership opportunity that I never would have imagined, and I might not have been sure I was up to. But when you love a place, and I loved this place, and I loved the Gulf Coast community, you know, God equips you to get it done.
It's an easy community to fall in love with. I've found for myself to be true, and it's really fascinating what you said, because first of all, John Dorhauer, when I called John Dorhauer, who was a member of my congregation in Phoenix but was now in Cleveland, he told me, he said, as I was trying to discern with him, right, whether I would say yes to Back Bay and leave pastoral ministry, he said, this is the church of today and the future. You know, and that resonates with what you said. And then actually just over at the Micah Day Center, we had the young professionals, Coast Young Professionals this morning. We did it in their shoes. And the beautiful thing, afterwards we had a panel of Loaves and Fishes, of Coastal Health, of Mental Health Association, and myself to talk a little bit about with the Coastal Young Professionals. And what was interesting was all of us in that room, yeah, we're doing this hard work, but we all said we need to be advocates, right? So it's that both and, which is really unusual. And I think one of the things we're trying to really enhance here at Back Bay is and I think part of it is indicative of that theme, making good trouble, is we want to even make more good trouble. So we do the hard work of serving people that are vulnerable, right? And then doing the hard work of advocating and being a voice and equity and justice, and it's all kind of mixed up together, but we do both, which is really unusual. And I've in my past have run not-for-profits before, but it was one side, you know, and it wasn't the other. So that to me is really rich and deep.
And you do it all by being still a relatively small organization. I always used to say this is the mighty mission that could. Like the mighty engine. It's the little engine that could. This place has had tremendous impact in this community and in the United Church of Christ. It's an amazing witness.
And we currently only have 17 staff. Small, right? And what you said about spinning off organizations. Now granted, Loaves and Fishes kind of came back, but they just came back to use our space. Kind of like they needed a space. You know, sometimes children come back. But I think about Coastal Family Health, and I think about the Center for Nonviolence. Those are much bigger than Back Bay. Far more employees, you know. And I was just talking to Stacy yesterday, that you're going to talk to today. She's the executive director of the Center for Nonviolence. I think they have 50-some staff. You know, much bigger, more locations, you know. But you're right. So that's that part of humility. And that part of seeing a need, identifying a need, organizing, and meeting the need here on the coast. So you're a conference minister now. So you're in the quote judicatory, right, end of the church body. So how does that fill you? How does that make your heart sing, Shari?
Well, now I'm on a different front line, and that is the front line of local churches. And that basic unit of the church and in the life of the church, of the United Church of Christ, as we say, and supporting them and supporting those who lead them and our chaplains in lots of different settings too. And without the local church, we are nothing. We don't need to exist as a judicatory if not for our local churches and those who worship there and those who lead them. So it's just a different front line, and it is very different setting than here. But the challenges are, again, different, but they are also deep and wide, and taking a lot of it's a moment of reimagination for the church also, and of newly equipping leaders.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that Back Bay does really well and that I so enjoyed here is collaboration. And I think as judicatories and as the United Church of Christ, that's another thing that we're having to learn. We're not so really great at that always in the United Church of Christ, right? Because of our polity and, you know, we're going to be independent. But this is not that day. We can't afford to be staunchly independent. This is a day for collaboration and reimagining together because we all need each other.
And you've been in that position 8 years.
9 years.
9 years? So curious to me, this just kind of popped into my cranium as we're talking, that so you were here at Back Bay during a time of incredible transition, whether Back Bay Mission was going to survive Katrina or not. Just came out of COVID, you're a conference minister, and you just said we have to look at the church differently, we have to dream, we have to reimagine, right? It's a time to reimagine. That's kind of seems like you're coming back full circle, right?
Well, yes, and you know, God always has God's own sense of humor. I said
God does.
More than once after I left here that I learned a lot and I was blessed by the whole experience here, particularly after Katrina and the whole experience of recovery. But I was glad to have been here, but I never wanted to do that again. That meaning disaster recovery.
Yeah.
And then...
Wow.
We find ourselves in the midst of a pandemic, different kind of disaster, but equally unsettling and shaking the foundations. And then actually for us in Minnesota, the murder of George Floyd, in my view, was yet another kind of disaster, human-made, but also shaking the foundations of what we all thought we knew or of the things that we all were ignoring. So, you know, God keeps putting me in those spaces of leadership that require a certain kind of leadership to lead through to another side.
God does. She does have a sense of humor. Let me tell you. Hear, hear. So I think that's
never say never again.
Never say never. Exactly. Exactly. Because it's going to be sure enough. So that's an interesting point you make about George Floyd, because I think that was a huge transition, cultural awakening, maybe. Although we're still questioning whether we've been woke up that much.
Time will tell. Yep.
Time will tell. Which I know we in Phoenix were out in the streets. BLM given birth, and I, for me, as somebody who senses this lifelong journey into the civil rights movement and how it informs movements for justice and equity today, I felt like George Floyd was pivotal. Can you say a little bit more about that? What that was like being in your position, or just being you in Minnesota? Because the one thing when I was in Minnesota that we discovered working with NAACP and a couple other organizations is that Minneapolis, St. Paul have the widest income gap between white and persons of color in the nation, right?
And educational disparity.
Disparity, correct. And we saw that and we were like, And then leaving there and being in Phoenix and then knowing about, you know, the George Floyd, what's kind of your narrative around that? And I'm sure you're still unpacking it as we all are.
Yes, we are, and we're still doing the work. That
deep
we
work.
knew we had to do before, and then we learned still more work that we needed to do. Well, the Minnesota Conference, I'm very fortunate, is a place that actually expects and wants its conference minister to be out in the streets. And to be advocating and at rallies and, you know, doing that kind of work. So in that sense, I didn't have to seek permission. But it was interesting that the murder of George Floyd occurred just 2 months after I told all our churches to shut down because of the pandemic. That was the timing of it. And so the first decision that came to me was, all right, I've just told everyone to be safe, follow these protocols, shut down, but now I'm really feeling called to be in the streets. And, but what am I modeling? Which do I want to model here? Do I want to model good public health protocols, or do I want to model good prophetic action? Because they actually don't meet up right now. So that was kind of the first discernment, and I, not immediately, but fairly immediately, decided that prophetic action in the streets was, I had to be there.
Yeah.
I could not sit home.
Yep.
And many joined me in that, and are still doing that. But we also learned as a conference that it's good to be out front. You know, the UCC has this, I don't know if you've seen the t-shirts, and I don't know if there's bumper stickers that say, show up, stand up, speak up for justice.
Yeah, I had that bumper sticker on my car.
What I learned, among many things, in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder is that that's all true. Those are important acts of doing justice. But sometimes you also need to back up and shut up.
Amen.
Because there are spaces where, as white leaders, we don't belong up front. And we need to back up.
Yeah. And
we need to not speak and be led and learn and listen to others. And the challenge is knowing what to do when. Because sometimes they also want and need you to lead and to speak. So it's a constant discernment that you need the Spirit to figure out somehow.
Yeah.
So that was one learning, and another learning for us is that we didn't have the kind of deep relationships that we want, need, and should have long ago had with communities of color.
Yeah.
And organizations led
Yeah.
by persons of color.
Yeah.
And that's something we're still working on.
Yeah.
It's actually much harder there than it ever was here. In a great irony in terms
Right.
of stereotypes people have about the South and the North in regards to race, I find it to be not consistent with the stereotype.
And if we would have had more time to talk one-on-one, that would have been, it has been a burning question for me, and a burning reflection, and a burning awareness, which I was surprised by. And yeah, realizing stereotypes, and even coming back frequently to northern Mississippi to be with family, my own stereotypes. And then meeting with a group of black leaders when I first arrived here that were more than willing to meet and talk and have a real honest conversation with this white guy, older white guy, you know, and they just looked me straight in the eye during a 2-hour lunch, which I felt honored to be there in many ways. They just said, we're tired.
Yes.
But we want white allies who will be allies.
Yes.
When we ask you to be allies. And I think that same struggle for me with George Floyd in Phoenix, right, was that whole, do we do justice? Do we follow our COVID guidelines? Are we out in the streets? And then when we're out in the streets, who speaks?
Right.
Who's in front?
Yep.
And those are some beautiful learning experiences that we as people of faith in the United Church of Christ that have had this heartbeat for social equity and justice, right? And being a voice for the voiceless have had to learn and probably relearn. And then I think, and I'm learning that and relearning that here because each context is different. Each community is different. It was different in Phoenix than it was in Minnesota. To hear Iowa, right, where you grew up, and Phoenix, because Phoenix had its own set of issues, especially with the Latinx community and immigration.
Yeah, and I think for a church like the United Church of Christ as well, who has in our DNA this impulse, constant impulse to do something, to act up, right? And to stir some things up, to stir up good trouble.
Good trouble,
which is a value, it's a good value.
Yep.
And yet, it isn't always the right thing in every moment.
Correct.
And we're not as good at discerning another possibility sometimes. So, and for leaders like us, it's often not our impulse either, firstly, to step back and follow others.
Yeah.
Or for an organization like Back Bay Mission, who's used to leading and has led so beautifully. So, yes, we all have work of the Spirit to do in this regard.
And that's what really drew me to the United Church of Christ from an executive director position at the LGBT Community Center back in the ministry. Was all these clergy and members showed up for a photo op to say, we're for marriage equality, right? And I'm like, I knew about you, but I didn't know about you. And so that's the thing that was so attractive, and yet, yes, it's a balance, it's a dance. And we're ever learning the dance.
That's a great word for it, yeah.
Wow. Well, you have to go to one of our favorite coastal restaurants now, which is Shaggy's. For anybody, there's 2 locations, or maybe 3 now. I don't even know.
3, yeah.
3. So Shari's going to go meet another executive director from the coast that she was close to here, and so thank you so much. It's been fun, and I hope this is the beginning to many more conversations. So thank you, because I want to say I stand on your shoulders, you know. And I know your shoulders are strong. So I'm so thankful for the work that you did here, and that I get to be here, right, and stand on those shoulders and the good work you've done, and hear your words of encouragement. So
Thank you for your ministry too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Safe travels.